What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Blue Bar's Garage. Today is an exciting day because, as you can see behind me, we do have an Eibach box, which means only one thing. We're going to be lowering this car about an inch on both the front and the back, and I'm going to take you step by step through the process. If you've never lowered your car before, if maybe this is something that you've been wanting to do, we're gonna walk through it and we're gonna install them together. So stick around, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So as you can see, we do have quite the wheel gap here. We can fit about three fingers right there. And let's see, let's pull out the tape measure to see what we got going on right here. It's about 1 1/8 inches of a wheel gap between here and the lip here, which is a little too much. We're gonna work on eliminating that gap here, and we're gonna bring it down 1 inch. That way it's gonna look a lot nicer. We opened up the package and look at these black beauties. Oh yeah. Awesome. Alrighty, looks like these on their side here, front right and front left, and these are gonna be rear. Man, they look pretty nice. So we successfully were able to release the lower control arm from the back. I ended up taking the bolt out of the shock first. What I would recommend is taking the sway bar end link right there. As you can see, there's the hole. I would recommend getting that out either first or second, and then proceeding by the bolt that is held onto the back here. Everything would be released, and therefore the lower control arm will lower, and that is going to be able to release the tension on the rear spring. Now that we got that out of there, I'm going to remove their spring, apply some pressure down here. There we go. Awesome. This is what the rear spring looks like. So of course we just have the rubber top there. I've actually never seen anything like this before on all the cars that I've ever owned. It looks like these rubber pieces here has a hole for the spring to go through. You literally have to back it out in order to get that off. Very interesting. And I would assume the top is the same way. Yep, you gotta back it out in order to get them out. Interesting, check that out. Crazy. We got our OEM spring out. Let's go ahead and compare it to our Eibach spring. So right off the bat, you can tell that the Eibach spring is a little lower. That's the top of the OEM one. And there's the top of the Eibach one. It's definitely shorter, but if you look at the coils, the way that there's way more coils on this one than there are on the OEM, a ton more. Yeah, I would assume that that's just when you're hitting bumps, it just compresses a lot easier maybe. I'm not quite sure. I found that interesting. I don't think I've ever seen a lowering spring with that many rings before. There it is in comparison to the OEM. Let's go ahead and install this bad boy. All right, guys, so we successfully installed the first rear lowering spring. I gotta say, it looks pretty dang good. I am not gonna lie. That looks amazing. A little note for the future. So I think what I'm gonna start with for the other side, when I do it, I'm gonna start with the sway bar end link first. I'm gonna undo that, and then I am going to undo this, and then once I'm done with that, I'm gonna undo this. Make sure you have your jack underneath your lower control arm, because if you don't, then the tension of the spring could possibly shoot the lower control arm and it could hurt you. Just a little pro tip here. What I do is I usually put the lowering jack underneath the lower control arm, and I jack it up so there's tension on the lower control arm. So then once I unbolt everything, I just lower the jack down and it slowly lowers down. When I do the other side, guys, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually just gonna keep that rubber part of the spring on the actual lower control arm, because there are two rubber grommets that go into the actual lower control arm. Let me see if I can show you. This is what I'm talking about, guys. There's two little nipples, 1 and 2. They go into the bottom of the lower control arm. If you try to put the rubber onto the lowering spring and then try to install it, it's going to be a pain in the butt. So what I recommend is installing, or even just leaving this rubber part on the actual lower control arm. And how you can do that is, once you lower it, you can put your foot on the lower control arm right here and just push it down with your foot, and then you can twist it out of the hold there. So that's what I would do, guys. And then the top hat just comes off. I'm going to do the other side off camera, and then I'm going to move to the front. All right, guys, we are now moving to the front of the installation. So we finished the back. The backs were a lot easier than the front is going to be, especially because of the way that the strut tower is designed. So the strut tower goes into this hole. When you try to drop everything, there's just not a lot of room and clearance for you to remove that downward enough to be able to get it out of the wheel well. It is a little bit tricky. Did, guys, is I went ahead and removed the castle nut, 36mm socket there that I rented from AutoZone, and I went ahead and removed the wheel and tire. So this way, it's going to give us a lot more room to be able to maneuver everything. I think what I'm going to do first is, we have 3 bolts at the top for the top hat. I believe they're 14mm. We're going to undo this, but we're not going to try to remove everything. It should be able to drop here and just get loose. We're going to remove this brake line and also this other line here. And on the bottom, there is 3 bolts that connect the lower ball joint on this knuckle. And we're also gonna remove the outer tie rod just so we can manipulate everything around. What I think I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna remove the lower ball joint, 14mm. So we're gonna do that first, and then I'm going to work on the outer tie rod. Oh, and then we also need to remove this rod right here. I believe that's a 14mm as well. So let's go ahead and jump into it. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this ratchet strap, and I'm going to strap it to the bottom of the lower control arm, and that way it's going to be able to look like this. And I'm going to use my breaker bar here and pull it through and use my foot to push down on the lower control arm. That way we'll be able to separate the knuckle from the lower control arm. All right, guys, so here's my little setup there. As I said, I installed that ratchet arm to the lower control arm, and then I ended up just using the handle from my jack. And I put it through, as you can see here. And then there's a hole on the top of the lower control arm, so you see it poking out there. And basically what I just did is I just used my foot and just pushed down. And what that does is it gets the lower control arm and it lowers it. That way you're able to remove that lower ball joint. So that's out now. So next thing is we're going to remove this outer tie rod. Also guys, pro tip, if you do have something like this, like a piece of foam, I would highly recommend when you go down here, this tab right here, what ended up happening on the other side is when I removed the CV joint, it ended up ripping my boot and I had to wait 2 weeks and it was a freaking nightmare and it sucked. Don't do what I did, guys, and just put something over it. That way it won't damage your CV boot. All right, guys, next we're going to remove these bolts. I believe they are 14 millimeter. All right, guys, so we successfully removed the strut tower from the car. This is basically the outcome. We had to remove the CV joint. We had to remove the lower ball joint. We had to remove all these lines, and then ultimately the knuckle and the sway bar end link there, and the outer tie rod. So that is basically all that you need to do in order to get this freaking thing out. So now that we have that out, we're gonna go ahead and take it apart and install our new Eibach lowering spring. Alrighty, time to move on to the strut tower. Oh, that is the wrong case. But hey, I've been looking for that screw, so glad I found it. This is the case that we need. There we go. These are strut spring compressors. So this is what's going to allow us to compress the spring, be able to remove it from the assembly. Here is the final product of the lowering springs. That definitely got rid of the wheel gap for sure. To be honest, guys, I was not expecting it to be this low. I thought it was just barely going to cover the wheel well. Like in the front here, that's not too bad, right? We can probably stick one finger in there. Remember, guys, beforehand, we were able to stick 2 fingers. In between here, as you can see, we can only really just fit the one. But in the back is more of a dramatic drop. That definitely goes well underneath the wheel well. And what I came to find out, guys, is when you're actually dropping the back, they do suggest that you get some camber arms, because I did notice that the back wheel, the camber is off a little bit. Not sure if you can tell, but you can see that there's an angle there. Slightly kind of curves this way, but it's not too bad, to be honest with you. I think, in my opinion, it looks pretty good. I kind of wish that the back wasn't as much of a drop, but at the end of the day, I think it looks pretty awesome. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Again, this is the Eibach lowering springs for the 2023 Honda Civic. And this one in specific is the Sport Touring. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't liked and subscribed, please do so to get some more content like this if you're in the market for lowering springs. Hope this video was informative in your decision making. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you then, or we'll see you another time.